Please review the tags and warnings before listening. You can visit the original fic by clicking the link in the description. Shamed and Shorn, a Bagginshield fanfic by Mordell, Chapter 1. The bedchamber, while not his old rooms, was still grand by any standard. The dwarves of Erebor were renowned for their craftsmanship, and it was evident in every corner of the room. Heavy tapestries adorned the walls, depicting legendary battles of dwarves and dragons, the stitching intricate and precise. The stonework was impeccable, with runes carved into the walls and ceiling, each one telling a story, each one a symbol of their proud heritage. The bed was a large, sturdy thing, carved from the same stone as the mountain itself, and it was draped in fine furs. The room was opulent, but they were not Thorin's. He'd never stepped in this room before, hadn't even known it existed. The royal chambers, however, those rooms were occupied by the new rulers of Erebor, King Dain and his family. This was a room for whoever was deemed an important visitor. Fitting for the former king, for he was now a stranger among his own people, a stranger to himself even. He'd come to that conclusion easily enough, considering the circumstances. Thorin was no longer king under the mountain, and he never would be again, because he'd died. Thorin stood before the mirror, staring at his pale and scarred reflection. He was unused to the face that stared back, gaunt, with wrinkles more defined, new scars, and more silver in his hair. After all, one day he'd been dying at age 195, and the next he'd woken up just turning 202. 7 years dead, 7 years lost in darkness and not even knowing it. Dain was king. Thorin was not. He was dressed in plain robes that he'd paid a servant to acquire in secret, and they hung loosely on his now much thinner frame. Ever since waking from stone sleep only weeks prior, his appetite had yet to go back to how it was before. In fact, nothing had been the same since. He reached up to touch his graying beard, what was supposed to be the proud symbol of his kingship that had grown as he slept, and sighed. He would be shorn of it entirely, a symbol of his shame and his failures, not only as king, but as a dwarf. He closed his eyes, steeling himself for what was to come. He thought of his nephews, Fili and Kili, lost in battle, and of the weight of his responsibility as their king and uncle. They had been young and full of life, eager to fight for the future of their people, and now they are gone. Not for the first time, Thorin wonders why Mahal chose him and not his boys to return. He did not deserve a second chance at life, or of so-called redemption. Maybe it was punishment after all. His sister sons called home to the halls of their ancestors, and Thorin made to wake and toil in his guilt for years to come. Tears pricked at the corners of Thorin's eyes, as he remembered the laughter and joy of his nephews. They had been his family, his only family since the death of his parents and the loss of his brother. And he had failed them, failing to protect them from the dangers of the quest. He thought of his sister, who he could not face no matter how often he was told that she eagerly awaited his return to the Blue Mountains. It would be too much to bear. Dis had lost everyone, including Thorin. Now her brother had returned to the living. It would be too cruel to return to her as he was. And then he thought of Bilbo, the hobbit who had been his unexpected friend and ally. He remembered the warmth of Bilbo's smile and the twinkle in his eyes, and he felt a pang of longing. He had loved Bilbo, and he still did, but he knew Bilbo thought him dead. He should probably stay dead. He was a shamed dwarf, unworthy of love and affection, and anyway, showing up randomly at the hobbit's door would probably give him quite the fright, to say the least. He should stay away. He really should, but he knew he would not, could not. Thorin opened his eyes, looking once more into the mirror. He saw the sadness and regret in his own eyes, and he knew that it was time. He took a deep breath, then reached for the shears and began to cut off chunks of his beard. With each snip of the shears, he felt a piece of himself falling away until he was left with a shorn face stripped of his pride. A sharp, plain knife smoothed away the rest, not even stubble left behind. His long wavy locks were supposed to be next, but he hesitated. Shaving the hair on his face was enough. Everyone who mattered would know what it meant. The hair on his head could stay, he decided, unbraided and unadorned to show he was no one of significance. Because he wasn't. Not anymore. As he stood there, staring at the complete stranger before him, he felt the tears rolling down his naked cheeks, stinging and silent. He did not mourn the beard. He mourned the loss of his nephews, the loss of his people, and the loss of himself. He felt like a broken thing, unworthy of the title or the respect he once commanded. The bare face in the reflection steeled, and the tears were wiped away. The once former king under the mountain stepped away from the mirror, donned his traveling cloak, and pulled up the hood. He gave one last look to the letters he'd left his friends and kin, grabbed his pack, and stomped over his shame left on the stone floors to a secret door near his chambers that would lead him out of Erebor unseen. Thorin stepped out into the bright sunlight, blinking in the light after spending so much time in the darkness of the mountain. He had never realized just how beautiful the world was, how much color and life there was outside the gold and silver halls of Erebor. It was almost blinding. He had always been so focused on reclaiming the lonely mountain, he had never taken the time to simply enjoy the world around him. Now, as he gazed out at the vast horizon before him, he felt a sense of awe and wonder, of freedom. No name, no title, no purpose, save one. All he was certain of was the pull towards the Shire, towards Bilbo, his one. He didn't know what he would say or do when he got there. Thorin felt a desperate need to see the Hobbit, to apologize and make things right. He only hoped that Bilbo would forgive him for returning to him, that the Hobbit would still remember him with some fondness enough to allow Thorin to redeem himself. And so Thorin walked, feeling lost and alone, but also feeling a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this journey would lead him to what he was searching for. Perhaps he could finally find some peace. Thank you for listening to Shamed and Shorn, a Bagginshield fanfic by Mordell. Please like and subscribe and let me know what you thought of this chapter.